One more thing I want to talk about with this front end setup. I guess for me, the one thing I noticed was that, or one of the biggest things this last weekend I noticed was that, back here, which may be a little harder to see, I don't know if you can or not. Right here I added 1.5 millimeters to this front end, which obviously adds a little more of the active caster effect. The difference between these two mounting points. The higher this is in comparison to this, the more the car tends to have grip in the middle of the corner, and that for rubber tires is like a really big deal. Because it seemed like to me one of the bigger problems with this car, besides getting the car to hook up the rear end, is that in the center of the corner the car doesn't have a ton of grip. It sort of like turns in and then slides and then gets through the corner, or the front end I should say slides and then it gets through the corner. Adding this to this caster angle, this active caster, I don't know if you can really even see it with the tires on, but if you look right here, you can see when I press down on the suspension, this kingpin moves forward, and as that happens, you see that kingpin moves forward again. As that happens, it takes away caster, and in the center of the turn, that makes the car grip, and it gets you through the middle of the turn a lot better. And that's really critical of rubber tires, I'm finding out. Changing this shimming up and down really does seem to make a big difference on the car really quickly. So that's one thing I did want to point out. The other thing too is you can see these arms on this car right now. They have a fairly flat arm straight across, and that's pretty key too, I think, because the one thing that's hard with this car, you can see it right now, I've got 1.5 camber on here. May not be able to read it, but that's what that is. I found that if you didn't have a lot of traction, it was hard to run camber on the front end, and I think that it's important with rubber tires to run camber on the front end. Even if you look at the full scale cars, they have tons of camber in the front end of the car, and that's just to get the the front end tires working. And the problem with this car is that if you have too much of an angle, where this is high, this point is higher than this point, where the arms are running down versus being flat, the car is gonna have a lot of camber gain and be really twitchy and hard to drive. And I think the way it comes stock, it definitely has more angle than what I have here. In addition to the fact that you can see right here, I think it's probably about 3 to 4 millimeters worth of shims on top, and then I have, I believe, 2 right here, and that's 2 right here, excuse me. That's just to level this from here to here, the way this is set up right now. And that's about, I don't have too much more. I could lower this front arm and have it be flat and without running into the post here that's on the arm. And this basically keeping, the more you take these shims and move them under here and basically create a downward slope on the arm, the more the car is going to steer, but it's also going to be very twitchy. Whereas this is a very calm type setting for the car, a real flat arms, real calm. That being said, this arm flat but raised up further up like you would have it stock, that there's something about the relationship between, you know, this, the difference between, you know, this arm and this arm, the taller it is, as this arm gets further away from this arm, it just seems to cause the car to want to screw itself into the ground. You know, like this at the kingpin, if you have, even if the arm's flat, if you have a ton of difference between the top and the bottom of the top and bottom arm, it just seems to add like this incredible extra amount of grip. And that's even something I've noticed in sedans. If you take a sedan, and, you know, and usually there's a ball stud and a camber link here, if you take a sedan and just start adding shims under that ball stud and raising it up, even if you raise up the arm here as well, you'll still find that the car just wants to get on the nose, you know, and really screw itself into the ground. So what we want to do is move this arm down and keep it flat, and you know, as flat as possible generally. You know, so here it's pretty flat. You know, and these are 0.5 millimeter shims. I found that for the most part you can do like 0.5 millimeter increments on the car, and it'll, you know, respond to that. You know, it'll be positive response. You'll be able to feel it. And generally, I try to keep this thing flat, and I really don't add, you know, go up or down too much from here, because even here I found when I was racing foams that this is, you know, this is pretty sensitive. This is very sensitive. This is really sensitive, even more so I think out here. But my philosophy is that if you know, have this arm set up where it's very flat, which keeps things pretty neutral, makes the car easy to drive. Really, the two areas you concentrate on tuning the car are this area back here, because if you have a car that's easy to drive in and out of the corner, the center of the corner is where you're going to be able to find your steering and more or less get your corner speed. Raising this up tends to make the car bite in the middle of the corner, and obviously you can go too far and make the car get funny. But if the car will, you know, if you can add more shims here, the car will bite in the center of the corner, just keep moving, and, you know, without causing too much oversteer. Because essentially, the more steering you can put in the car, the faster it's going to go through the corner. But we don't want to make it where the car is very twitchy and hard to drive, especially in sweepers and stuff like that. So that's why this is a more important adjustment to worry about than fooling with this too much. And then beyond that, this is, you know, obviously you can change this for the center of the corner. I find that the camber is just the key to sort of overall amount of steering in the car. And that's because when we flatten this arm, this is where we're going to find the camber in the car. You know, instead of letting an angled arm give us camber gain, which is, you know, too progressive, I think, for rubber tires on this car, we just worry about the static camber, you know, using the plate, which is not something that's going to jump up and bite you, you know, when you go to turn the wheel. You know, if you go to crack the wheel, and all of a sudden the car goes from, you know, fairly calm to wanting to do donuts, that's hard to drive. Whereas the static camber is more of, you know, you know it's there, and it's the steering, the feel of the car remains more linear, and that's probably the most important thing, I think, especially rubber tires on this car, is to have a linear steering feel, so you can really drive it and you know, get a positive feeling out of the car where it's not doing something different in every single corner on the track. You know, your car's gonna be consistent, and consistent is easy to drive, and consistent is also fast. You know, you're not getting surprised by your car all the time. So that's kind of like my philosophy of the way to do things, at least for this thing. And then the other thing, just to point out, which, so everybody knows, you know, right here, this is the servo is, you know, the output shaft is in front. if you can really see it too much, but this is like a 9551 Futaba, so it's a half servo. The front end is on the chassis, the rear end is slightly elevated, and that helps, I think, just to sort of make the car a little easier off center. But that's kind of beside the point. The main thing is getting these links moved down and then also move forward, because that gives you can see here, this gives you a good Ackerman angle on the car that helps with the car to you know, keep it steering, not be too lazy, but at the same time we also are not getting a bunch of bump steer. You know, the car is not like towing in and out massively, which is what it does with the steering setup in stock fashion. The tires will just, you know, you'll see the tire angle go crazy. These are barely moving. The tire angle is hardly changing at all, if it is. So I've been trying this setup on the steering for a while, and I really liked it. So I tend to recommend that for overall. I mean, and, you know, and you can obviously tweak things like with the amount of spacers under here, or even the angle of this thing. But I think just the forward-facing servo, with, you know, the links are a little more level too. You can kind of see here they're actually in this case running down a little bit. I probably should actually have a little more spacer here, but they're a little more level than they are when you put the car together the way they tell you to in the instructions. So that's the front end overview, at least so far this year, for rubber tires. So I think that's probably about all I have to say as far as that goes. Is enough blabbering by me. Anyway,